So it is now time for our first speaker. Dani Jones is a children's book artist and writer. She earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from BYU-Idaho and has worked with clients like HarperCollins, Simon and Schuster, and the LDS Church Friend magazine. She is the author and illustrator of the children's books Monsters vs. Kittens, Dinosaurs vs. Puppies, and Once Upon a Time There Was a Pig. She is currently active in her LDS ward in New Hampshire and enjoys being part of the Affirmation community. Dani Jones.
First of all, thank you to the conference committee for inviting me to speak. And I'm excited to be kind of like opening up the conference. And by excited, I mean terrified. But I've made this deal with God that if he gives me the opportunity to do something that I know will help me become the person that I want to be, even if it scares me, I will do it. Because I know the things that scare me are probably the things that will help me the most. And of course, this has backfired on me because now I'm like terrified all the time. So, and just when I think I'm safe, I've done all the learning I need to do, life comes at me like, how about speaking in front of hundreds of gay Mormons? Okay, no. But I knew I had to say yes because I knew this was important. And because I've spent far too long feeling like I was alone as a gay Mormon. So I attended my first conference 2 years ago. And it didn't take me long to fall in love with the Affirmation community. And my favorite part of being amongst you all is just hearing all your stories. So tonight I thought I'd just simply share my story and hope it resonates with some of you. So I've loved art for as long as I can remember. But when I went to school, I had no intention of being an illustrator because, of course, society tells you that artists are poor and starving. And so I grew up thinking I would get a real job in something like medicine or business or computers or something. But the only direction I felt could truly make me happy was art. So in college, I had to make a decision. Do I go all in and get an illustration degree, or do I leave art behind for good for something more practical? And I knew that getting an art degree would point my life in an unconventional direction. And it was one that I was told was headed for disappointment. And could I be brave enough to break from a conventional life in order to pursue what I thought would make me most happy? When I graduated, I was hit rather quickly with several big obstacles, because first I had no idea how I was going to make an art career work. Second, I went through kind of a faith crisis. And third, I had absolutely zero social or dating life. And I remember a time, there was this moment when I was sitting at my desk in my bedroom, and I just had no money, no God, and no friends. And I was just overcome with hopelessness. And it was like a darkness had enveloped me. And looking back, I've kind of realized that everywhere that God has guided me over the following years was kind of in direct reaction to that moment. In my life, I can point to several times where I've just felt a strong pull. So as Mormons, we would say, I felt the Spirit. And it would either be a thought that would occupy my mind constantly, or some feeling that would drive me to take a certain action. And I felt strongly that there was some force working outside of me and helping me. And I felt one of these pulls one Sunday when I was sitting in sacrament meeting, and I was just wondering how I was going to make this art job work. And I was filled with a feeling of peace. And I remember it because it was a very specific feeling of courage, where everything that I had been worried about just seemed so easy. And I never forgot that. And I think God was testing me in that moment to see if I had the humility to listen and the courage to act on it. And that little nudge was enough to push me through the fear. And shortly afterward, I was able to do some things that got me my first children's book job. And I've had plenty of ups and downs since, and there have been days where I'm not sure if I broke that starving artist stereotype, but I've continued to feel God's guidance in navigating it. So the second big pull that I felt in my life was church. Because I grew up not really feeling like I belonged in Mormonism, because everyone else just seems so perfect and different than me. And I struggled to feel any kind of testimony throughout my life. So after I left BYU-Idaho, and I was home now, so I reached this point where I had to decide for myself, like, do I want to go to church or not? And to be honest, I had kind of expected this moment my whole life, the moment where I would just like walk away from church. But for some reason I did. And service church was really challenging for me. I felt incredibly lonely, and I wasn't even sure why I was even there, other than I just felt a strong pull. But the most profound thing I remember about those years is how God kind of pushed me into all kinds of relationships, whether it was people I worked with in callings, or like kids I taught in primary and young women, or just friends who reached out and served me. And then one Sunday I just walked into my ward and realized I was surrounded by family. And I don't mean to say that I gained a testimony because I made friends, but it was a reflection of the transformation that was going on inside of me. Because I remembered that girl that sat in despair in her bedroom those years ago, and she was the kind of person that like hated people and hated her life and resented God. So the transformation for me was nothing short of a miracle. And it was a time when I had to learn how to open myself up and serve the people around me and get to know firsthand the power of the atonement of Christ. And for the first time, I felt like I had a testimony I believed in. And I felt like every good part of me that was hidden inside of me just came out. And I was able to change from a lonely recluse to a sister, daughter, teacher, and friend. And so I tell you all this so you can understand that my relationship with the church and with the Mormon community was never really something I took for granted, because it was something that really earned. And it truly made me a better, stronger person. So when I finally admitted to myself that I was gay, I thought I might lose it all. So here comes the third big pull of my life, coming out. And so my faith kind of shattered because I didn't know what to believe in anymore. And I wondered if all those times I'd felt the Spirit were false. But I knew that coming out would change the nature of all my relationships in awkward and maybe negative ways. And at the time, everyone was drawing these dividing lines in stuff like elections and marriage equality and bathroom debates and church policies and suicide epidemics, still are. And the message I received from both the LDS and LGBTQ communities was that I didn't belong in Mormonism. And that was kind of devastating to me because I had worked so hard to create a life for me at church. But I had also felt this really strong pull to come out, like so strongly that I felt my life depended on it. And so I prepared to take the only path that I thought was ahead of me, and so I got ready to leave the church. However, one question that came to my mind when I kind of changed my course, and it was just simply, what if I just kept going to church anyway? You know, what if I disagreed with church policies? And what if my leaders and my entire ward knew I was gay? And what if I decided to date? And what if I was labeled different or bad? And what if I did lose some of my friends? But what if I kept going to church anyway? And not out of rebellion or for others' approval, but just because I wanted to be there. And that one question removed a lot of the conflict I was feeling because it gave me permission to forge my own path. And I didn't have to discard my spiritual experiences, and I didn't have to separate myself from my congregation. And it was a little bit easier to put aside the damaging messages that I received from my religion. And despite any consequences, what mattered most to me was my personal relationship with God. And I also knew that being my honest self among my Mormon friends was just one thing that I could do to maybe help bridge this rift that hurts our unity so much. And so I strongly felt that that's what I needed to do. And I don't want to invalidate the decisions that others have made to stay or the church. This is definitely not me saying that it's better to stay. It's just me saying that this was simply the right balance that I needed. And it gave me the confidence to rely on God and the peace to take life as it comes. And my relationships certainly did change after I came out, but not quite in the way that I had expected. Because it turns out that being more open and vulnerable about my life strengthened all the ties I had around me. And not to say that I have been free from awkwardness or disagreement, but overall, I have found that people have been drawn closer to me, not farther away. And I am continually amazed by it. So the theme of this conference is Journey Together, and I think that's really appropriate message in regards to my story, because I feel strongly that Heavenly Father has given me a very specific message, that my personal power is in my relationships. And I can't afford to separate myself from people I love because they are what build me. And now after coming out, I kind of feel those roles starting to reverse, where not only am I taking in strength from other people, but now, for the first time being my whole true self, I feel like I'm fully able to give it back. So we are all living in a pretty unideal situation. And ideally, we would be unabashedly accepted with open arms by our church and our families and our community. But it's just not the case yet. But we all have that power in our relationships. And I've seen the effect that a lot of you in this room have had on the hearts of your parents, your spouses, your children, your ward members, and your church leaders. And each one of you touches the lives of many other people. And every time you allow yourself to be a little more brave and vulnerable, you let people in and strengthen the ties around you. And that's not to say that all relationships will be good or comfortable. And I don't mean to suggest that we should stay in relationships that are harmful. However, amidst our losses, we also have the power to find new relationships in places like here in Affirmation. And our efforts to be true to ourselves, even when it's awkward and painful, is not in vain, because that conflict can bring new awareness, and that's how we move forward. So in the book, Never Ending Story, the main character, Bastian, he gets transported to this magical world of Fantastica. And in order to return home, he is given just one simple instruction, and that's do what you wish. And on his adventures, he meets this wise, mystical lion, and he asks the lion, he goes, what do you suppose it means, do what you wish? That must mean I can do anything I feel like, don't you think so? But the lion replies, no, it means you must do what you really and truly want, and nothing is more difficult. And it's the most dangerous of all journeys. And it requires the greatest honesty and vigilance because there's no other journey on which it's so easy to lose yourself forever. So we who live in this awkward intersection of sexuality, identity, and religion are forced to ask some hard questions about ourselves. You know, what do we truly want, and what does God want us to be? And if we are not honest with ourselves on this journey, we risk losing our very worth. And if we deny another's chance to live honestly, we put them in danger. So through this process, I've had to get used to the fact that not everyone's going to do things in the same way. And conversely, I don't have to do things in the same way as everyone else. You know, God has a different plan for each of us, and we do a major disservice to ourselves if we ignore the pulls that he gives us to guide our life. So, are you willing to live an unconventional life? And are you willing to be brave? And I now feel enormously blessed to be a gay Mormon because I get to see life, love, and faith from a different perspective. And I might be terrified all the time, but also the happiest I've ever been. And if we're not at least a little bit scared, then we aren't getting anywhere. So my challenge to you is that you follow wherever life pulls you. And whether you believe that pull is from God or from your own intuition, just follow it. And all you have to be willing to do is take that one little thing that scares you, but that you know will bring you closer to that person you want to be, and do it. And in doing so, I think we can all make it on our journey home together. Thank you.